Good morning, and welcome to Sunday Soul Day, weekly fuel for your mind, body, and soul. Today, we're going to listen to part two of Joe Spector's interview. If you recall, Joe is a retired firefighter, podcast host, and author. If you haven't checked out part one of his interview, be sure to do so. Joe takes us on quite a journey filled with the highs and lows of his life. Joe's journey reminds us that our Creator gifts us with crowns. The crowns represents our journey, and they're filled with both jewels and thorns, and both are equally blessings. And like DNA, no two journeys are alike. And that's why it's so important for us to share our stories. I can't wait for you to listen to part two. It's going to be filled with gem after gem after gem. So grab your pen and your paper and let's dive right in.
All three of us, I can say, have gone through our journeys to be in a position to be of service to other people. You had touched on the concept of emotional fitness, and I'd love for you to define that term for our audience and why it's just as important as physical fitness, especially for first responders.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I love the analogy of fitness because it's totally applicable. And it seems to be a language that we all understand, particularly athletes or first responders who are so into their fitness. My definition of emotional and mental fitness is building the muscles that help you cope and thrive in life. So empathy is a muscle that you can grow. Gratitude, not in a toxic way where we pretend the bad stuff doesn't happen, but actually focusing on things that you would be lost without and giving attention to those things. Those are muscles. Where you focus and attention through meditation, every time you come back to your breath, you're doing a rep like on the bench press. That's emotional fitness. And so when somebody cuts me off in traffic, I've done so many reps and I have so much muscle memory that I can actually feel the anger and I'm fit enough to take a breath and relax my body and be like, he's driving like an idiot. I'm back to the music and enjoying my life. Resilience, that's a muscle. I'm so resilient now that like even when people die or there's chaos, like I don't enjoy it, but I can get through it. I guarantee you I can get through anything because I'm so buff in the resiliency department. And same thing with responsiveness, like the traffic example, being responsive in a way from that you want to respond from your values and your heart or your big picture rather than reactive to your emotions. That's a muscle. Learning how to recognize your emotions like the dashboard on your car and not be swept away by them or let them control your life, but not dismissing them either. Like they're great indicators. Like I'm angry now. I need to take a breath. I need to step aside. I need to put a boundary up in a relationship. Like I'm sad. I need to cry and grieve or whatever it is. But these skills, just like fitness, they happen with exercise. You can't just will it to happen or be aware of it. You have to work out, and it doesn't have to be a ton, but just like you have to work your body out. And no matter where you're at in fitness, if you're obese and diabetic, it's still not too late to walk around the block and to just like incrementally add one salad to the plate or whatever your struggle is. And if you're already a freaking super athlete, I know we got one super athlete here. You're a super athlete too. So check this out. There's no downside from going from functional to exceptional, right? Athletes always want to get bigger, faster, stronger, break another PR. Well, I want to be a freaking emotional super athlete. I want to be happy as fuck, pardon my language. And I want to be able to thrive no matter what. And I want my kids to be like, I'm sure they're going to have their own issues and be sitting in therapy when they're 30, but I don't want their issues to be like, dad didn't set me up for success on this. I want it to be like, you know what I mean? So just like, these are skills and they require daily attention and daily exercise and tracking and goals, just like regular athleticism, but it's not unattainable if you just devote 10 or 15 minutes a day and a little bit of attention to it.
I love that. And I'm picturing being in a car and getting an emotional reaction and having the preparation to take on whatever situations right in front of us because we've done the emotional preparation. The same way as an athlete, I played college water polo, by the way. As an athlete, we prepare physically. for the sport. We are now preparing physically emotionally for the circumstances that could happen.
Yes. And also the cool thing is mental and emotional fitness are super intertwined, obviously. So the better you get at one, the better you get at the other too. I mean, look at any college or elite athletes. Like I'm guessing you guys dove into your own psychology too. The mind is remarkable when it comes to competing and stuff like that. And so there really is no downside. Like you go from having these lagging skills to like having better relationships and feeling happier and maybe not treading into suicide, or you go like us, like to go from being happy to being always happy. Like I love that I'm mindful and that like I can walk into a room where my dog is and I can take a breath, my current dog who's a live journey, and I can look at her and I'm not forcing it, but because I've worked on my gratitude muscles and my focus, presence, attention muscles, I'm so fit that I can walk in and it doesn't really matter what's going on. I can look at her and I just like smile. And that little bit of joy is those little bits, they add up, man. They're like bank accounts. You throw those in the deposit and you're going to get some withdrawals, but the more skill sets you can put in this bank account, the healthier your bank account is, the more wealthy you are, in money, but like in emotions too, or physical fitness or whatever. Yeah.
I love that you called them deposits into your that is so good, because, and I think the more that people put into that, they have more to draw on in those moments where things are not, so great. But you're just so removing the stigma from mental health and the struggle. And I love that you're doing that with people who deal with it the most, first responders, police officers. And would love to hear a little bit more about your journey towards radical wellness and resilience. What were some pivotal moments and kind of practices that you implemented that really just help you build this kind of unshakable happiness that you're experiencing now?
I would say the two biggest tools are mindfulness and meditation for sure. And there's so many ways to do it that you can find a way that feels good for you, just like working out. Like not everybody has to go sit. I like sitting still like this, but you don't have to. Just like you can box, you can play water polo, you can play football, you can run, you can jump rope. There's a million ways to meditate. It's just focused attention and checking in with the dashboard of your mind and your body and your emotions and learning what's going on. But again, just like your cardio, like you're not going to be in shape if you're not out there jogging 3 days a week or whatever it is, right? Like those are muscles, that focus and the attention. And so meditation is huge, but I found I'm meditating forever and I still was in crisis. Meditation needs to be complemented with emotional processing techniques and tools, which also there's a million different ways for your personality. I offer a lot of them, but whatever works for the individual person. But like, I learned a lot of these with the kids too. I teach them with the firefighters. So anger, right? Well, one of the ones with the kids was move it to lose it. Get out there and run. Don't not pretend it doesn't happen, but table the anger for a minute, table the issue and go sprint and see how you feel. Or like I said, doing that meditation where you give the raw voice to your anger or venting to a friend. For grief, everybody grieves differently and grief is so messy. But for me, the expressive letter writing is very painful to walk through, but it's so cathartic and healing. So we have to understand our emotions. And same when I say emotional processing, the good ones too. How do you amplify your joy? How do you train your brain to recognize when you're happy? So to process the good and the bad emotions and to take a few minutes, I don't know, 5 minutes minimum, but it can start with one breath because it's very uncomfortable to sit in your mind and your thoughts and your feelings when you're not used to it. One breath, and then tomorrow do 2 breaths, and then tomorrow do 3. Or like if you're an athlete, go for a run, but don't put the headphones on. Feel the sun. How much can you feel the ball of your foot and the heel of your foot, your stride? Like just bring your attention to your senses and to the real world, because part of my language again, but your mind is a dick. It's pesky and it wants to drag you into the abyss of the future, the past that already happened, the future that doesn't exist. And it will rob you of the only moment you have, which is the present moment, 100% of the time, unless you go to battle against it with meditation and emotional processing, and you become so fit that you can actually become friends with your mind and your emotions. And it's like, hey, welcome to the party. All right, anger, you're a welcome party guest here. I don't quite like you, but I know how to handle you. You're going to eat all the chips and you're going to make a mess, but you'll be gone soon enough and I'll vacuum. And joy and gratitude are here too. So they're offsetting it, like welcoming all of the experiences and the emotions to the table. But like I'm rapidly summarizing. It's a daily practice. You know what I mean? Every day, do it, whatever works for you. I do a little gratitude journal and I write some stuff down. I make sure 2 or 3 days a week to give myself 20 minutes to write those letters if I want to. I meditate every morning, just a few quick breaths. But then in the evening, I like to do a long 20-minute session or in the middle of the afternoon. But for me personally, and what's worked with the other first responders I've been working with, is meditation and emotional awareness and processing in combination, almost like lifting weights and doing cardio and diet and exercise and sleep, right? There's a few variables, and those diet and exercise and sleep also. I'm crazy. I like getting in that ice cold water. I don't really like it, but my drug of choice is dopamine and resilience. And when I do that hard thing that I don't want to do and I get out, I feel happy. There's lots of different methods, but that's the gist of it.
No, thank you so much. And the emotional processing, like you said, so wonderful. And the mindfulness and meditation. I love that you mentioned the letter writing, because I think like when you are thinking things, right, and then to transfer it down into your hand onto paper to get it out of you. I'm so big on releasing things, and that is such a great way to release. Like every single night before I go to bed, I write 3 things I want to release. And I'm telling you, I sleep like a baby, because I release things. Like I don't like to carry anything from anger to sadness to, I'll feel my feelings, I'll go through it, but then I give myself a window to feel that. And then I'm like, okay, now let's focus on the gratitude, like what can I be grateful for, And so I love that you mentioned that. And I've written letters to all sorts of people via email, but I'll email it to myself. And it could be very angry letters, that I might want to choose my words before I speak to them, but I'm like, let me get all this shit out first, like I'm going to say it in a way that's not, I'm not thinking about choosing my words or whatever. And it really allows me to then have a healthier conversation, and focus on the thing and not my anger bringing to it. So love that you mentioned that.
That's a brilliant way of doing it. And it's so true. Like you're talking about, like whether it's anger or resentment or grief, it's not about like, sometimes it can be contentious when you're talking about forgiveness and somebody was abused. That is not what I'm talking about. But when you are harboring those things, you're holding on to hot coals and your hands are getting burned. And it's not about the other person. It's empowering yourself to release, as you said, and to no longer get burned. And you also brought up a great point. Like when I do those writing, it's very important that I might follow up with the right email that has a good choice of wording, but this one is for me, right? And I'm not thinking about typos. I'm not thinking about language. I know for a fact I'm going to delete the document afterwards. I'm doing it when I'm alone in the home. This is where we're getting raw and we're just writing or typing. Like there's something magical that happens when you give yourself and it takes practice a few times before you get in the groove, but to free flow. And you're like, even somebody who's super self-aware, you're like, whoa, that was in me. Okay. But now that's out of me, and it's so beautiful that you do that before bed, that you focus on both too. You release the challenges, focus on the gratitude, and then your subconscious is already set up for success while you're processing everything while you're sleeping.
Oh, absolutely. And then even like if it's really bad, like I'll do something where I'll write it on paper and then I'll rip it up.
Yes, that or burn the paper. There's so many methods with that.
I don't like to use fire, but I like to.
I've never done it either, but a counselor had told me you could burn it, you could rip it up.
I know, I love the burning, but I rip it and I'm like, and I'll rip it into shreds and then I'm like, whoa, I feel, I'm like, that feels so good.
It's almost a primal release too, right? You're like, oh, like you're symbolizing to your inner child, like, I'm conquering this. I've got it out. I'm ripping it up. It no longer has power over me.
No. And then I always tell my inner child, like, you're safe now. You're good.
Me too.
Good. Yeah. Love that.
Yeah, and depending on the circumstance, I like both. Ripping sometimes and burning sometimes, just depending on where you're at to get that ultimate release based on the circumstance. Joe, I love that you touched on the mind being a dangerous place. We talk about that in the 12-step recovery model. The mind is a dangerous place, so bring company. You touched on the depression is when we're in the past and dwelling on the things that we can't change, and the anxiety is being in the future. And tripping about things that haven't happened yet. And so when you talk about emotional fitness, prior to emotional fitness, you need to have mental fitness, because mental leads to emotional, which leads to the action or the physical. And so having the mental fitness of practicing the gratitude, practicing those affirmations, and getting our mind in that space, like what Jay Shetty says, that you can either have the monkey mind or the monk mind. And so am I feeding my mind or is my mind feeding me? And we have to get intentional, feed our mind, mind in order to get present. So thank you for touching on that. And then I have a two-part question for you. As an author, you've shared your experiences and insights. What can readers expect to find in your book?
Okay, so I wrote a memoir that is like the full long version of what I shared with you, and that is completed, but I'm investigating what my publishing options are right now. So my guess is it won't be out for a year or two, because I will either be lucky enough to get it published and I'll be on a publisher's timetable, or I'll self-publish and it's going to take me a little bit of time to learn that arena. In that book, in fact, I'd be happy to I'll email you guys some copies if you're interested in kind of beta checking it out. And I'm humbled, legitimately, and honored by the responses I've been getting. I'll tell you, I talk a lot about the way I parented my daughter and how when she was screaming at me, I softened up, and how it went against everything in my nature, because even when it's your little baby girl, when somebody is like biting you and hissing at you and stuff, you want to go like this. And it was like warrior's path, right? Like I learned to soften up just like you would with like a rabid dog, not the comparator to a dog, but you would never gain the trust or influence of an animal if you're like overbearing. And I learned all about that stuff. And one of my best friends on the planet is a retired police officer, but before he was a police officer, he's a retired Marine. He is hardened. Like, you know, those guys are like brainwashed, trained killers. Not that's not an insult. Like they'll tell you, I'm friends with a lot of former Marines who are like recon guys. That's like what they are programmed to do. And he read it, because even though he's like a hard killer machine, he's also like one of my besties, right? And he called me crying and he said, this has brought to light some mistakes I made with my daughters, but it's not too late. And Joey, I'm going to change the way I parent because of this. And he's been talking to me about his feelings since then. And this is like the last human being on the planet. My intention wasn't to change anybody. I was excited. I finished my book and I wanted to share it with some friends. So that's like something that you can expect. You can see a gritty dude who has been through chaos and fought a lot of fights and kicked in burning buildings, pouring its heart out, talking about pain to purpose and trauma and triumph. And the story is quite honestly, in a lot of ways, stranger than fiction, and it's miraculous, and it's a whole lot of rain with a beautiful rainbow at the end of it. And I think you will learn a lot about your mind and your emotions. But I don't know when it's going to come out, but I'm going to send you guys a copy. But I also did write an ebook, which is like 30 pages of exercises like what we described here. I put the feelings wheel on there, and then I try and make everything relatable from a place of like, I'm no better than anybody. These are all the things that were hard for me, but also I want to share them with you. So like, it's like probably 20 different tools, mindfulness, how to do like a mindful eating exercise, all the mental and emotional fitness stuff in an ebook. Like, and just to give you like a quick example, like on the feelings wheel portion, I share how to do it. And I share that by offering a real story of, while I was writing that ebook, I had come up with the feelings wheel, and my mom had just passed away. This was last year. And I normally don't snap at my kids. It's just something I've conquered. But my son was, I don't know what, he was bitching at me about something in the kitchen. And I snapped at him, and I hate it. It used to be normal, but now it's like, I feel it. And it's not, I'm such a safe space for them. It's almost like I have to be even better now, because if I am even remotely aggressive, because they're so used to being so safe and soft, it like disillusions them and throws them off balance. So right away, I caught it and I was like, dude, I'm so sorry. Can we talk real quick? And I pulled him in the couch, and I write this in the ebook, but it's more condensed because I'm not going to ramble on for 100 pages. But like I said, hey, dude, I'm writing an ebook right now for the podcast. I'm learning you have to have like a lead magnet and all stuff. I said, I'm working on this feelings wheel. Do you want to do this with me? And he was like, sure. And so I told him how if you scan this wheel, sometimes your brain knows the word, but you don't know the word. And so I showed him what I did, and I said, okay, in the kitchen when you were arguing with me, anger, that's what I was feeling. And he's like, okay, me too. And then I said, but right now I'm feeling sadness, and I think I'm thinking about Grandma Jan, and I'm grieving, and I'm so sorry. I think I snapped at you with anger because I'm feeling sad and grieving. And so I didn't even know that I was feeling sad. And he got to watch me hit that sad. And then he said, what did he say? he said, I said, do you want to give it a try? And he like looked at it and he said, disconnected. I think that was the one he came across or something like, and I said, okay, well, now I'm feeling embarrassment and shame. I'm so sorry, son, that I yelled at you, you know, but like within a minute, we looked at this wheel, we hit our finger on the feelings, and we were back to playing football in the front yard feeling good. And I modeled to my son an apology. Well, I condensed that into just a few paragraphs, but I share that story with the feelings wheel. And then I share the anger iceberg, and it's like anger on the tip. And it's like childhood shame and all this stuff. So a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about today in my ebook, as far as what to expect from me as an author, a transformational book that will teach you the 101 basics of mental and emotional fitness and give you a lot of perspective is what you could expect in that book. In the memoir, when it comes out, I think you can expect to cry a lot, but to laugh a lot and to feel a lot of redemptive trauma into triumph, and it will probably shift maybe the way you see life, because it was a really wild journey and I kind of put it all out there.
I love the emotional wheel, and I can't wait to read your book, read your ebook, and then practice those techniques with my daughter. I have a 4-year-old. So the second part of my question is, and I know that you have said that books by Dr. David Siegel have been really helpful in your journey. Any other books or podcasts that have significantly influenced you in your healing journey that you would like to recommend to our viewers?
Yes, I wish you asked me this. I should have taken notes, but I'll tell you off the top of my head. Some of them intertwine. Like I learned a lot about me and how to adult from the parenting books. So they can be applied across the board. But if you ever are parenting an explosive child who's like really explosive and so explosive that your neighbors and friends like you're ostracized, Dr. Ross Greene wrote a book that I think he changed the title of, but when I read it, it was called The Explosive Child, and he has a podcast. And you will feel like you're on an island when you're in that scenario until you listen to that podcast and you hear the other parents and all the thousands of people who are experiencing it, and how to learn that even the most aggressive, manipulative behavior, he has a way of teaching you that it is an unmet need and a lagging skill being communicated with, and how to meet those children. But that's also how you meet your inner child and your wife who has bipolar disorder too. It applies across the board. So anything, go ahead.
Oh, just knowing the intentions behind. We see people's behaviors, but we don't see their thoughts and feelings. And so it helps us to, when we have empathy, to know that there's an intention behind it. And it's usually not to harm another person, it's for self-preservation. So thank you for touching on that.
Thank you for saying that, because a lot of people struggle with that, especially when their kids are being manipulative, and you can tell like they are being manipulative, but he has a much better way than me of articulating that, like, every kid wants to be doing well and well adjusted, even the one who seems like they're not. And a lot of parents push back on that. And they're like, well, why does my kid doing X, Y, and Z, screaming middle finger? So think about it. Every child would like to be sitting around the dinner table feeling secure and knowing that their parents are proud of them and value them the way they are. Even if their behavior is not expressing that, that is where they would like to be. So if they're not there, it's not because they're jerks. They're children. They haven't had enough practice and they're struggling, and they're sharing that with you in a really shitty way that triggers you because nobody taught you when you were a kid. So both are true. Your kid is triggering you and you're unnurtured. It's a cycle, but it's just, he's an expert at it. And I drew a lot of comfort from listening to that podcast and reading that book, along with The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Dan Siegel, and cannot remember the co-author's name. She's another female PhD, amazing parenting. I can't, either way, they co-wrote a couple of books, and The Whole Brain Child being one of them, Drama-Free Discipline being another one. For me personally, The Power of Now was very impactful. I find that one to be hit or miss because like it changed my life so much. It might be more than 101 level. Like the firemen are like, what is this? Like they can't listen to Eckhart Tolle and the bells chiming and all that. For me, I had already been trying to get into consciousness and evolution and emotions, and it just was the perfect timing. I go back to that book over and over again. Same with The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. I'm not sure if you've ever read that book or heard of it, but wow, to talk about how to heal from our thorns and process through those things. And then lastly, I would say, is that on there? The green screen? Yes, it's one of the best. Is it not one of the best of all times? Yes. Okay, thank you. And then The other thing I would say is this is kind of, it seems like it would be off topic, but it's not. There's a podcast called Curable. It's called Like Mind, Like Body. And it's by this group that called Curable. And they're like neurologists, neuroscientists, and psychologists. And it's a, you can buy the app if you want, but you don't need it for the podcast. And it's for people who struggle with chronic pain. And that is where I learned the expressive letter writing and how my meditation practice can be applied to, like, sometimes you can have a very real injury like I do, but I'm not in danger, right? I'm sitting here in a podcast. So I don't need the pain signal to be turned on, but it is turned on. And they teach you how to actually, it sounds so cuckoo, but to talk to yourself, like you said earlier, I'm safe. I could tell my brain, like, thank you for that pain signal, Nick, but I don't need it right now. I'm safe. I'm just sitting in a podcast. Or like specific nervous system regulating meditations, or the body keeps the score, right? Like that's another good book. Well, they apply those principles to expressive letter writing to actually release, as we were talking about, releasing that stuff from the body. And so the truth is, it helped me significantly with my chronic pain, but I was in it for the chronic pain, and it helped me way more with my emotions. Like so Like Mind, Like Body is a podcast designed for people with chronic pain. But I'm telling you, if you have depression, anxiety, physical pain, pain is pain. It's such an incredible resource. And it's a lot of outside of the box tools, like taking over the inner monologue and writing letters and things that aren't quite common. And there's a lot of success stories on there and just people sharing. So I could probably go on and on, but those would be my top resources.
Wow. Joe, those are, first of all, incredible books. Ali and I both have read a lot of those books and reference them with our clients on this podcast.
Nice.
And I love The Whole Brain Child. That's like one of my favorite books that I read when I first had my children. And I think you mentioned The Power of Now, Untethered Soul, which I think Ali was holding up for you. And also The Body Keeps the Score. That's a good one. I think I did a book review on that one. I love that book. Thank you so much for sharing that. Tell me a little bit about, like, you're a father, you're a husband, you're, of service to such a large community of individuals. How do you take care of yourself now that you have all of these amazing tools, and you're applying them daily? Like, what are some ways that you fuel your mind, body, and soul?
That's a good question. And to be totally honest with you, I'm still learning how to do this in the new role that I'm in with, like, being a content creator, because that started out as something that was supposed to be healthy for me. And, like Eckhart Tolle says, the minute you think you're like dialed in, the ego will sneak in the back door. I am open to that, but I would have sworn I was impervious to burning myself out because I'm so good with, like, boundaries on myself. I've done the work, right? No, I got way off balance for a little while. Like, saying yes to too many things. And like, I have that fire department, that police department speaking gig, and then I got invited to speak on a cruise ship. So right now I'm writing 2 big talks, I'm doing the podcast, and then, like, my content is like lagging behind. I'm trying to batch Instagram content, all this stuff. And it's like, I have to remind myself regularly, you're retired from the fire department, dude. Why are you slave driving yourself? Like, you are supposed to be doing this because it's fun and healing for you first. Like, you don't even have a boss anymore. You have the luxury of taking the mask off. And it's almost like, since I started working for myself on this passion project, I drive myself harder than an employer would. And so I'm really, and for a while I got way out of balance on it. And like, I was ruminating on things and stressing and all these feelings that I was like, I'm not unfamiliar with, but I thought I had broken free from them. And so, boundaries now. So what I did was, like, I almost want to share my screen with you. Can I share the screen for a minute? Is
Yes.
that okay? So I created just recently are you seeing this schedule right
Yes,
here?
it's perfect.
And it's like those, like, you can see it, like, meditate. And then I do my Instagram, wake up, and then mobility workout. That's important. And then these are the highlights, are where I ask my wife, unless we have an emergency, don't text me. I want to be off duty, if that's okay. Meditate, rehab, yoga, walk my dog, meditate, strict bedtime. And so it's actually by being kind of a little bit type A and making sure that I dedicate time to myself to recover and be spontaneous and regulate and process my emotions and do the workouts and the things that feel good, and blocking the time off and enforcing those, and letting myself have permission to go, whatever gets done today, and whatever doesn't is okay. And I have to remind myself of that regularly, because I can see why people who become successful content creators actually quit and have mental health struggles. And I want this to be something that bears fruit for me and keeps my cup full. And I've worked so hard on it. I don't want to turn it in. So, like, for example, with the podcast, that is my baby. But I got invited to do this fire department training in these 2 big talks. And so I put it on hiatus, and it kind of sucks. I was in a groove. I miss it. There's episodes I want to get to, but I realized there was no way I could give quality attention to these 2 big talks that I'm giving and engage with my family and be there for my kids and keep my cup full. And so putting a boundary up on myself and saying, I love this podcast. I'm going to get back to it in 3 or 4 months. But for right now, it's on hold, and that's okay. And these other things like the gratitude journal and the meditation, all those, I'm like forcing myself to do them because I can get in a flow state with work, with content creation, where, and a flow state is a beautiful thing. But I think I'm not a doctor or scientist, I'm guessing. I think I get caught up on adrenaline or something, and I will forget to I will forget to eat, I'll forget to do anything. And I'm having fun. I'm like, this content is fun. But then all of a sudden the whole day is gone. I haven't eaten, I haven't engaged. And then right when I'm done, even though I felt so good, it's like the adrenaline on a house fire. I get a dump and I feel burnt out and hungover and exhausted. And it's like, I have to put boundaries on myself. I'm going to work for 2 hours at a time on mentally and emotionally taxing creative ventures. And then I'm going to get outside and then I'm going to meditate or whatever. So a lot of learning and realizing where my new thresholds and capabilities are, and a lot of communicating with my wife what my needs are now that I'm back to work, but it's different. I work for myself and we're still tag teaming so many logistical things with the kids in the house and her job and everything. And making sure that those self-care things are highlighted. And even if I miss 1 or 2 of them, I have like 10 of them on there. So I'm like, if I get a C minus, I'm still hitting like 70% of these things that help me stay well. And what helped me get well along the way, I haven't forgotten, you know?
Yeah, no, I love that. It reminds me of a talk I gave recently. I think Allie was actually on that call as well. I gave it for community women of the channel, and one thing that we touched on was auditing your time and energy, and paying attention to how you're spending your time, but then also like measuring the energy too. So like, is your energy high, in the morning? Is it higher in the middle of the day, and all of those things, as you're incorporating self-care the way that you did. Measure, like, how did you feel like when you did those self-care? Was your energy really low? Like, is that still working for you, like, because that's the thing, we're constantly evolving, every single day. So, making sure that, you're paying attention to those things as well. So
Did
thank
you
you.
ever read a book about managing energy instead of time? I read when I was
I
trying to
have
become a
not.
captain, I read a
I have
leadership
not.
book. I'll send it to you, but
Yeah, please.
it's almost like you're quoting it. And it talks about how we manage so many things, time, money, and different things, but your
Do.
energy is your most finite and valuable resource. And you need to audit your energy, like you said.
Yeah, well, we do, because we all have the same 24 hours in a day, but we can choose what level of energy we give, right? And that's something that we all, is different. And so I'm just really big on energy. Like, I've been able to feel energy since a child. So I've always gotten really curious about that, and being able to understand my energy and the energy that I show up with. I remember Allie, when we first met, she's like, you have such beautiful energy. And I've always wanted to experience my energy, And so in order for me to do that, I'm like, I had to really get in tune with myself to understand like how I was showing up, and all of those things that we have to do every single day, from our work to our kids to, our own self-care. And then, how is my energy in all of these things, and, what's giving me energy, what's not. So
Well, and
You
Joe,
do have a beautiful energy, by the way. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Allie. Both of you guys have such great energy. And to get in tune with what drains my batteries and what charges them has been a hard lesson, but it's kind of I'm glad to be middle-aged and have gone through a bunch of trauma, because I know to say no to a social thing, that because I'm kind of an introvert who people thinks they're extroverted, like, nah, that drains my battery. I don't really want to talk about the weather. I'd rather go deep like this. Like, to know what drains my energy has been a beautiful fruit from that.
yeah, and I love that you touched on the energy flow, and just because you can doesn't mean you should. Meaning, right, I think we kind of disassociate from our body and we get in the flow. Then we don't eat, we don't drink water, we're just in this creative space. And that's great, but then we can pay the price later if we don't hold, set and maintain those internal boundaries. Because then we, like I said, we end up later paying the price. Maybe we were able to stay up all night. Okay, but how are we going to feel the next day? How's our energy going to be impacted the next day? And then how's it going to impact the people around us and our performance?
100% yes to that.
So I have one last question for you. I'm sad that we even have to end this interview because it's been so amazing talking with you and getting to know you and just hearing your journey from triumph to tragedy to triumph to, just being human and connecting with others and giving little tidbits. It's been amazing. Thank you so much. I want to hear about what are some of your aspirations for your future?
Okay. Right now, I am tunnel visioned on being the change in public safety. One thing we kind of started to touch on was the culture of not talking about feelings and not normalizing these dialogues. I can't explain why I'm at this place in life where I don't give a shit what anybody thinks about me. I'm not self-conscious about crying or talking about my feelings. I don't recommend everybody else go out there and bear their trauma in front of the world and do this. I'm equipped for it, and it is going to be that in conjunction with everything God put me through and all the skills that I've acquired of like learning how to speak, learning how to share my story, learning how to hold space for other people's emotions and how to put it all on video. I am going to knock, there's 30,000 police and fire departments in the country. I'm knocking on every single door. I'll give it away for free if I have to. I want to get this training in the hands of, I want from 10 years from now, my aspiration is that something that is entirely lacking right now, which is mental health struggle prevention within public safety. I want that to actually be the norm. I want to go from 0 to 100 on that. And there's plenty of room at the table for everybody. I want everybody's help, but if nobody's willing to do it, I'll step up and do it all. Like I'm going to talk to everybody. I'm sharing my story with every fire chief, every police chief, every city manager. I'm making the training digestible and accessible. And my aspiration is, like when I got hired on the fire department, they ask you certain questions. How are you going to leave the department better than you found it? And some of those things are like cliche. To me, they're not. I take pride in that. That's my organization. I'm proud to have been a firefighter. This is how I'm going to leave my fire department, the police department, my brothers and sisters, humanity, my children, and the world better than I found it, by just being the most authentic, healed, vulnerable version I can be of myself, and then sharing the tools wherever I have a platform. Right now, I happen to have a platform and influence within public safety. I'm pounding doors. This, to me, is the numbers are staggering and it's unacceptable. And I'm not one to bring a problem without a solution. So I'm shouting to the rooftops that this is happening, but I'm also trying to share the tools that help me out of it and give it in a format to where it's an easy yes for fire departments and police departments to onboard it. They spend so much money on so many frivolous things, and we train so much on so many things. You invest tens of thousands of dollars to put somebody through an academy and do all that. Invest $100 per head for annual emotional fitness training or whatever the number comes out to. I'm making a number up there, but like my aspiration is that by the time I leave this planet, the next generation of firefighters and police officers, it is normal to talk about struggles. It is okay to say that call was hard for me. I'm trying to shift the culture. It's like, I don't want to compare it because I don't want to diminish like real civil rights, but it's like, I almost feel like it's like my civil rights movement. Like people are effing dying and children are getting abused of it. It's not okay. And so I'm speaking up on it. I'm trying to change that. That's it.
Thank you. I'm following your entire journey, and you chose to shift from police officer to firefighter the way you served, and then you were forced into retirement and then shifted the way you serve. But now look at how you're serving. God is good. This is amazing. Thank you. What an incredible interview.
God, it's good. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, by the way. Thank you for holding space and for facilitating it. You guys are incredible at doing conversations like this, and you made me feel very, very set up for success and safe and comfortable to share all of those things. And you were so validating and encouraging. Thank you guys both so much.
Thank you so much, Joe. And God is so good. And your journey, Ali, you couldn't have said it better. I love that you have a new way to serve the community, your family, even yourself. and you're doing it all, walking with God. So I love that. And I wish you the best of luck. You and I are going to continue to stay in touch. Joe is also in Arizona like I am. So that is another common thread that we have. So thank you so much for blessing Sunday Soul Day, and everyone have a blessed Sunday. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to have had this opportunity. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.